Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Undercolor of Law hot take on the news that President Donald Trump has now done what he promised to do, which is to issue a massive bunch of commutations, pardons to the January 6th defendants. And when I say massive, I mean massive. It's everybody. So as Politico points out in their reporting, President Donald Trump, quoting, pardoned about 1,500 people who stormed the Capitol in his name on January 6, 2021, instantly laying waste to the Justice Department's 4-year drive to punish the first disruption of the transfer of power in American history. The sweeping grant of clemency includes, quote, full, complete, and unconditional pardons for some of the most notorious participants in the attack, including hundreds convicted of assaulting police, carrying firearms, destroying property, or otherwise contributing to the violent rampage. Trump also ordered his Justice Department to shut down hundreds of pending cases. Now, what's really noteworthy about this is, as we've discussed before, the pardon power in the past has been put through a structured process where, when I was at the Justice Department, there's an office of the pardon attorney. And one of the things that was done was to really make an in-depth investigation about people who were applying for commutation or for pardons altogether. If it was a violent offense, highly unlikely they were going to get pardoned, because you're looking at the criminal history, you're looking at the nature of the offense, what evidence, is there some question of mitigating circumstances, some question of maybe was the proof sufficient, and a lot of emphasis paid to what the defendant has done since then to show themselves to be deserving of the commutation or the pardon. And again, the real emphasis is how unlikely it would be to get a pardon for a violent offense, because violence has been done, there's victims. Now, among this massive bunch of pardons, I just want to check the statistics for a second here. There were some 608 assaults, resisting, impeding, or civil disorder charges, and of those, really importantly, about 174 of them were charged or convicted with using a deadly or dangerous weapon causing serious bodily injury to officers. Those are the weapons like the Trump flag poles or flags carrying the Confederate flag being used to beat officers, fire extinguishers, all of that. So all that is gone. And the significance of this is really quite enormous. I mean, although it's no surprise, the significance is really huge, because this was actually the largest group of prosecutions the Justice Department had ever undertaken. And on this point, I mean, I've certainly faulted them for failing, particularly A.G. Garland, failing to start early enough on Trump and his inner circle, the sort of masterminds behind a lot of the election interference efforts. But the department started with a very, very classic approach, which is let's start low, let's start with violence first. And to their credit, they did a damn good job of that, which is they tracked people down all across the country, finding them, tracing them through video surveillance, old-fashioned boots on the ground, to find these hundreds and eventually over thousands of these people who had participated in this and then had scattered across the country. That has all been completely wiped out now. And any cases that are still pending, those are also being dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot be brought back. So consider for a second what this message is really sending out. What it says is that if you want to act in violence on behalf of the regime, you will be protected. And there's a long historical precedent for things like this, to turn loose the power of a vigilante mob, to incite them for your own ends. We can look back internationally to Mao Zedong's efforts to use young people, the Red Guards, who, in the name of class struggle, looted, beat, murdered. And he very well understood the power of turning loose these people. He didn't need to send an army out to do things. Rather, he indoctrinated and convinced young people, misguided, to commit violence in the name of the chaos he needed to sow to overcome political enemies at that time. Bringing it fast forward into our modern age, obviously in the American South, the KKK was vigilantism being protected by the powers that be to turn back the effects of allowing black people to move up, trying to keep them oppressed, make sure they still feared the original ruling class. These are all part of the idea of using vigilantes for your own political ends. What Trump has done now is he's carried on that tradition, of course, and now what he's doing is making it crystal clear that if you do that for him, you're protected. So one thing you really have to consider is not only what will these people do who have been let out and pardoned. I mean, there's a good argument that some of them have learned their lesson. I mean, they're not very interested in continuing to do anything violent. They kind of don't need to. But the real significance here is also in the message. People who may be thinking of doing violence, people who want to misguidedly support Trump, or people who are just very violent people looking for an excuse to go after people, they can be greatly encouraged by this. Will Trump pardon them? Maybe, maybe not. But they can be encouraged to say, hey, I'm going to do this in the name of politics, in the name of supporting Trump. I'm going to say that I'm a big supporter because they figure, hey, that may cause me to get pardoned. So that introduces an enormous amount of chaos into the future at this point to have actually done this on this scale. I mean, there had been some talk of him maybe communing or pardoning nonviolent offenders. He at one point had said something like, maybe not all of them. I'll look carefully at it. Obviously, didn't look carefully at anything here. Now, on the other hand, President Biden did come through with the preemptive pardons we've been talking about, a pretty broad slew of them. Not broad enough, in my opinion. I'm not going to name all the folks who did not get pardoned. I don't want to draw more attention to them. But certainly somebody like Alexander Vindman, whose wife was quite vocal in protesting the fact that he was not pardoned. It could have gone even broader than that. But, I'll give the President Biden's administration and him credit for attempting to do this, attempting to put something out there to preemptively protect people who clearly are going to be targeted or may be targeted. One of the people who was pardoned, I was just listening to on television an interview, was Michael Fanone, the police officer who testified before Congress. He was recounting the threats and harassments on him that started right after he testified, including the swatting of his elderly mother, and he recounted that, human feces had been thrown at her. The fact that this is the situation that he faced for being a witness and a former law enforcement officer protecting the Congress really gives you a sense of what we're up against now. The fact that Dr. Fauci, a public health official who oversaw the response to the COVID pandemic, saving countless lives while the Trump administration endangered and caused the death of countless lives, the idea that a public health official needs a preemptive pardon just points out how far removed from the normal moral guidance that a government is supposed to have right now. So this is done now. He's pardoned these folks. Biden's done what he can. There isn't more to really say on that. We can analyze and keep an eye out for what these folks do, what other people may do in the future in the name of Trump. So what can we do now? Well, for now, you can really just make sure that the past isn't prologue, and you can make sure we don't let them forget it. There can be a steady drumbeat of that. It has to be a steady progress towards changing things in the future. Can have some loud protests, can have a lot of outrage at the time. That's natural and it's good. But what's really important to do is to keep that up, not let it be forgotten in a very steady way, whatever form that takes. Whether it's looking for legislation, whether it's trying to elect everything from local officials to federal officials, it's got to be a steady drumbeat. Let's make this party remember, the Republican Party, what they have allowed to happen and what justification they've given. And another way to help everybody remember is social media. So I'll close here with this clip that the producer, not the actor, Morgan Freeman, has been posting a lot, and it's a way to help us remember and hold people accountable to make them remember too. I'll talk to you soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.